afraid of the suit ones though. And firmware encryption is new.
Yeah, this one is just based on existing RFC CFRG, right? It's not defining anything new on its own, right? It's just leveraging the existing HPK technique.
Yeah.
So it's not introducing a new threat vectors. It's
What?
probably
But
defining.
has it been adopted yet?
It's adapted.
Okay. And then, what are the other suit ones? The firmware encryption one I thought was new.
Yeah, it's 909 version. Manifest. It's anyway dependent on manifest. Manifest should be much more mature by now.
Yeah, I mean, it's on version 22.
What about this suit trust domains? Seeing what this. Let's see what.
Maybe relatively new as well.
Probably I'm thinking of getting the IoT directorate ops and other reviews as well. Getting that.
You can trigger early reviews.
Yeah, I think we should.
Yeah. You can do both security and IoT. Oh,
It's time.
It's time.
Yes.
It's time. You want to do it? You want me to do it?
It started now.
Oh, do we have? Did you want to do it?
Should you start?
Okay. Okay, before we can get started, we need 2 note takers, please. Anyone? Anyone remote that can help take notes? We're in the agenda. We can't even start the agenda bashing. I need somebody to help volunteer to take notes. Let's see if there's somebody I can pick on. Thanks. What was your name again? Haiwan? Haiwan. Okay. Can I get a second one? We're going to have to listen to the recording.
Or else I'll take the notes.
What's that?
I'll take the notes.
Okay. Oh, but you're flipping slides too. You want me to?
No, that would.
And I'm keeping time. All right, we'll just go ahead and get started.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for taking notes. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to our first day of the IETF 116 You are in a trusted execution environment and provisioning working group. So that's what we will discussing. If you were not expecting that, you're probably in the wrong session. Next slide. Hopefully you're all familiar with the note well. This is just how we conduct our business here in the IETF, especially with respect to intellectual property and whatnot. Meeting tips. Make sure you sign in either using the Meet Echo or the QR code that's up there. For those that are remote, please keep your audio off. You might have better performance if you keep your video off as well. For those especially here who are present, just so that the people that are remote, if you want to come up, just put yourself on the queue before you come up to speak, please. All right. Code of conduct. Let's keep our discussions with respect and keep them impersonal. Keep them professional is the way I would say it. Okay. Thank you for the note taker. Let's get to the agenda bashing. We're going to start with Akita giving us a hackathon update. Then we're going to have Dave talk about the transport and the protocol drafts. And then I don't see Hannes. Is Russ in the room? Okay, this is going to be interesting.
I thought Hannes is going to join remotely.
I don't see him on
Oh.
online. So they will be last. Hopefully Russ will show up. Otherwise, any comments, additions, or otherwise on the agenda? Going once, going twice? All right. Akita?
Okay. Okay. Thank you. This is TEEP hackathon report. Yesterday I talked a little bit in 3 minutes. Official explanation was hackathon report yesterday, but unofficial objective of yesterday talk was for the people who is other than TEEP to understand how they would able to use and move to CBOR from JSON was unofficial objective for me yesterday. And today is, yes, this is the picture on Saturday and yesterday, Sunday. Yes, and we were implementing the implementation for the draft and purifying the draft. And next, please. So today's official objective is also going through this slide, but unofficial objective is we're going to have a hackathon demo from 6:30 tonight at I think it was 403 or same room, same floor. This three. Yeah, somewhere in this building from 6:30. So I will 3 or 4, then just going that way, 2 or 3 room that way. So please come to the demo, what we did, we were implementing on Saturday and Sunday. It wasn't only from Saturday, Sunday, we've been doing for implementation very long time to making the draft able to implementable and making the feedback to the draft. And today's demo will be mostly implemented from SECOM. And I was also had an implementation at AIST. Okay, the next page, please. Yeah, so this is from here is some of the discussion we were solving for the implementation. And this first one is clarifying how the CNF was going to be used in the implementation. So there was in the GitHub discussion from the last IETF was 115, and about 2 or 3 weeks ago, Yes, from the second, for their implementation, there was a discussion about what we do for the compromised TEEP agent situation. And the situation itself is solved in on the GitHub, and it's resolved by adding CNF to the query request. So that was not the discussion topic on this slide for the during the hackathon. After we added the CNF description and honestly, Dave added these changes that update to the draft. Inside the Japan team for the implementation, reading the draft, it's the two words were coming up for the verifying, TEEP agent and verifier. And the text message for the 1.0 talking about the signed verifier and 2.0 talking about the agent. And on the CDDO format, it has two lines. For me, I thought this was just adding the line feed for the being exceeding 80 character of the one page. But some of the people thought this is two different key in the CNF. So one must be verifier and another must be hash value of the, one must be hash value of the verifier and one must be TEEP agent. And no, was the conclusion. So then we were able to go through the implementing CNF during the Saturday and Sunday. Yes, next page, please. Yes. This is also was related to the question on the 2 or 3 weeks ago about the compromised TEEP agent. Honestly, it wasn't, real discussion was not about the compromised TEEP agent itself. It was TEEP broker will be running on the Linux side, which is not protected from SGX like a TEEP agent. So we are going to assume TEEP agent is not going to be compromised, but what will happen, there was a TEEP broker who might instantiate two or three TEEP agent, and some of the broker could be compromised. And in the discussion in the in the TEEP draft perspective, it's fine. It's not fine, but it's not something we have to reconsider and have to take action, because TEEP agent itself is not compromised, and it's not breaking any assumption in the draft, because the TEEP agent itself will have their own key pair, which is going to be different from the other SGX chip. And also the TEEP key pair inside the one SGX chip will be using the same key pair. So that was the conclusion. And next page, please. Yes, this was a purely more implementation topic. So it was clarification, token challenge, and TEEP message. TEEP message has a query request and query response, and another one, if that was okay, it goes to TEEP update and return will be success or error. So for the implementing the TAM side, matching the token request, matching the query request and response, and also matching between the TEEP update and return of the success or error, with if they have multiple agents from the TAM, need some of the ID to match between the sending the query request from the TAM side, and if it's sending multiple TEEP message query requests from the TAM to the agent, and if it's having a multiple reply from the agent, there needs some of the ID. And we did discuss this topic not long time ago, IETF110, and for the query request and reply, if there's a challenge option used for the freshness, we will use the challenge and not using the token option. And for the TEEP update message, we will use token and not and the TEEP update do not have a challenge field. So that was the conclusion what we have decided. But in the TEEP, for the implementation for the today's demo, it was easier for the TAM to use token for the both ways on both situations, because if you have in the looking for the field to read the token, yeah, using for any of the sending and receiving message, one might thought it will be easier to implementing. But at the end of talk discussion, yeah, we keep it as it is what we have decided at IETF 110. Yes, next, please. And yes. This was something a long time ago when we started to, it's related to something we decided to use CBOR. So initially, I think it was 2020, February hackathon at Berlin when we decided to use CBOR. And we went through some of the iteration from adding the description and the draft, how to write the describe in the draft, and also how to implement the example in the draft in CBOR. And in the real situation, one of the last thing was missing. Then something other than I explained yesterday was CDDO description definition will be in the draft in .md file in the GitHub. And every time we discuss some of the issue or discuss some of the topic in the IETF or on the GitHub, we're going to update the draft and update the CDDO definition. Then when we add the .md file, we have a separate .cddo file, which need to have the same CDDO definition and description, which was manually updating manually and making a little bit change on the MD file. It wasn't done automatically to reflect it to CDDO file. So that was something was a bit yeah, little difficult to do it manually. So it wasn't difficult, but cause a it was a little bit tedious. So it was definitely doable adding a sed and the make file. So I did making a way to automatically generate the CDDF file, but what time is okay?
Yeah, 2 minutes.
Yeah, okay. Okay, and these are the CBOR, yes. So this is something I explained a little bit in the yesterday, so we could skip here. Yes, and this place I wasn't really sure explaining yesterday was there is a reason using a CBOR and the benefit. One will be smaller binary size. So this is something was comparing if we describe the same message in the JSON and the CBOR, the difference will be in this smaller. And also one of the reason I was adding the comment on the left side is the person who is experienced in the writing ASN.1 might think why the difference between the ASN.1 and CBOR. So CBOR, if you really careful and if you have a experience with the C language with the able to speculate from the C language and what kind of binary would generate from the compiler, it will be nice to have the same kind of feeding with a CBOR. So that was trying to having information in the comment. Yes, please.
You have 1 minute left.
Yes, and also CDDO file is very convenient to describe the CBOR message. The one burden is the CDDO description always depends on the other CDDO files. So was downloading and concatenating was done something in the past and pretty much working fine in the TEEP message, TEEP draft. So if any other draft would like to use a CBOR, please copy our way in the make file, make it much easier. Yes. And yeah, we could go. And this is something we're going to display from 6:30. So please come. So we have on the left side is the ARM TEEP agent. Honestly, there's only TEEP agent running on ARM Opti, and the TEEP broker is running on the right side on the screen. But in the middle is running the TAM server. And the next page, please. Yes. So this is the main, most important pages.
Hey, I see no new issues reported as part of the hackathon. I see no new issues.
Yeah, we did, but we went through and pretty much solved it. There's one thing it's still pending is we rely on some of the suit CDDO, which is not finalized. So yes, but it was something we need to work on with the suit working group.
Thanks, Aditya. Any questions? All good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Akita. I'm taking notes 'cause I don't see.
He's also taking notes.
I'm thinking the only issue that was opened or reopened was the one that doesn't affect the draft, that affect the tooling or something like that. So for the creation of the draft. So. All right, I'm Dave Taylor. We're going to talk about the TEEP over HTTP transport specification. Last IETF, we sent it to the IESG. And we'd already had, I think, at least one area review that happened prior to last IETF. But since last IETF, we had all the IESG ballots and the sector review that came in. And so you can see the summary of the ballots. And so I'm going to go through each of the different comments there because I have the next version of the draft 15 ready to post after this meeting. And I'm happy to take any additions into it that come up during the meeting. But my expectation is probably tomorrow, you'll see a draft 15 that we'll have in here what I'm going to talk about. And the intent is this addresses all of the IESG comments and it should go to the RFC editor in theory. Okay, so Eric Klein, Internet Area Director, commented on a phrase that appears twice, once in the agent behavior, once in the TAM behavior. That says, if any local error occurs where the TEEP over HTTP client can't get a message buffer back from the TEEP agent or TAM, then here's what you do. And he said, okay, well, do you have to have a timeout there? I don't see any guidance about how to have reasonable timeouts. What if the thing doesn't respond? What do you do? And so the text in bold is added to the GitHub copy, ready to go to draft 15, which says, and by the way, at the hackathon, we pulled all the implementers and said, do you have a timeout in your code? Do you have a timeout in your code? And everybody had the same answer. So we put it into here, which is note that no timeout check is used in the TEEP over HTTP client layer. Any timeout would be handled inside a TEEP agent, right? Remember, the TEEP over HTTP client layer is generally untrusted code, and the TEEP agent is trusted code, okay? And so rather than the untrusted code saying, here's my timeout in case the trusted code doesn't respond, right? All the implementations just block and assume that the timer is done, if there is one, on the inside, okay? Most implementations don't even have a timer, right? Because all the stuff just completes synchronously. But you could, because if you are installing a piece of software, like from a suit manifest, that could be time consuming, okay? And so your timeout is actually not in the TEEP agent in that case. It's way down inside the suit processor, which is also in the trusted code, right? And so that has to deal with that. But the broker level, which is what this document specifies, there's no timeout in any of the implementations. We don't know a reason to have one. And so we wrote it down in the bold text there. Okay, I'm going to keep going. And by the way, all these answers have been responded to the area directors on the email response. So there's nothing that I'm going to show you that hasn't already been posted back to the original commenters here. And a number of them have already acted that says, yeah, that looks fine to me. All right, do we skip one or am I on? Who's after? Okay. We go backwards.
Okay, this one.
It was sec. No.
Yeah, no, we're on the one.
Back.
Go back to Eric and then go forward. I think this is the right one. Is Eric the one right before this?
I think it was Eric.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So number 4 is a sector review from Stefan, which was then referenced in, I think, Romans. He commented on the word strongly there. We say it's strongly recommended that implementations use HTTPS, and he says, you probably don't need strongly, you're saying recommended, and he refers to the our April 1st one about other fake normative language like ought to and so on. And so we just removed the word strongly, and so now it has the same sentence without the word strongly in it. No technical meaning change. Next. So Roman was then referenced Stefan's as part of his ballot. And here Roman also commented on the transport document that uses this term about message buffers. Like, did you get a message buffer back, right? Like in the text that I was quoting that Eric commented on. And he said, I can't find the term message buffer anywhere in TEEP protocol or TEEP architecture. And so I looked and no, he's right. The other documents use the word message, not message buffer. Simple fix, the meaning is the same. And now the transport spec always just uses the term message. Now it's consistent. So you have a empty message instead of an empty message buffer, which is, the lack of anything to send, right? Roman commented on the text about the URI being exchanged, and he suggested providing a reference to section 7, that's the security consideration section, of 3986 to provide generic guidance about dereferencing URIs. And he commented on this in section 8, which is the example walkthrough, right? Here's an example flow, right? A sends this message, B receives it, B does this, and that kind of thing. And so I responded saying section 8, the example is just an example, but I did take his guidance, added that into the actual security consideration section that now points to section 7, security considerations of 3986. And so now there's a reference in there. Okay. Transport area review. So here, this one went back and forth with like 2 rounds, and the area director, is it Zahed? I'm not sure I pronounced his name correctly, sorry. He suggested the text, which is now in the document, which is to be secure against malware, a TEEP implementation, blah, blah, is expected to run inside a TE, and a TAM might or might not run inside a TE. And so his original comment was, well, this is the introduction section. Number 1, why do you use normative language in the introduction section instead of in the body of the document? And number 2, it's not really the job of this document to talk about where you put the TEEP agent that's in the other documents. And he's right. And so that statement, all the relevant statements are already in the architecture document and the protocol document, and this wasn't the right place for it anyway. And so accepted his wording as proposed. So then he commented on the bottom half of that slide still. He says, no cache control header is needed, okay? And then he suggested alternate text, hence cache control header must not be used, right? In other words, use must not to say, not that it's not needed, but just don't put it there. Said, okay, fine. Accepted as proposed, his language is now in there. Next. Art area review from Francesca. She talks about, it currently referenced 2 different sections of RFC 9205. That's the one that says how to do protocols over HTTP. And she says, well, which part of 442 is relevant here? Again, this is in our security consideration section. Well, it turns out that section 6 of that one internally explains what the parts of 442 is and references 442. So by referencing just section 6 alone, you're already answering her question. So we just removed 442 and. Okay. Her next comment was, by the way, there's a new reference to BCP 195. Yep, updated references. And then finally, more than one person commented on this one, and the last part here, which we actually discussed in IETF115. So this was when you're done with the exchange on the TAM side, what do you return as your HTTP response code to say, I got no body, we're done, you don't need to send me anything else, okay? And so this came up in Karsten's review that we discussed at IETF 115. And so we said, well, the reason that it says should on 204, okay, and so the paragraph on the bottom is literally the text that was prior to last IETF 115 that we discussed at IETF 115 that went out to Karsten and the document editors, and we talked about it at 115, but it turns out it actually didn't go out to all the art areas, so Francesca didn't know that, okay? And so I basically said, oh, yep, we missed CCing it onto this other alias. And by the way, here's the paragraph that we all discussed at IETF 115. And it says that the only reason it's a should is because some implementations don't actually say what the status code is. That's up to a lower layer, and they just say return, and the lower layer decides based on whether it's a body or not, right? So if the lower layer says it's 200, we don't care. It's supposed to be a 204 if you want to comply with 9205, right? But the TEEP protocol itself doesn't care. And so we couldn't think of anything better to say. And so we just said, well, here's why, and we couldn't think of anything better to say. Francesca acted and said, yeah, thanks. Paraphrasing. Okay, let's go fast. All right, Murray's comments duplicate the other ones. He just happened to be later in the list here. So there's nothing new in Murray's. All of Murray's actually, somebody else also had the same comments. So next. John Scudder, there's 2 scenarios in the document, and he mentioned, yeah, that's not the complete list. That the text here was to motivate why we do agent initiated. And so I put parentheses among others to say that this is not a complete list. And John said, looks good to me. That's it on the transport spec. So the point is, as far as I know, all ISG comments have been addressed. Unless anybody else has anything else, then after the meeting, I will publish, probably tomorrow, I'll publish draft 15. And then we can take it through the rest of the ISG process.
Yeah. Any last questions on the draft?
This was to confirm I'm not breaking consensus or whatever. My belief is all of these are just editorial now, things that we've already discussed, all technical stuff last IETF even. So
I think we're good.
Yep. Next presentation. Okay, now I get into the more interesting one, meaning there's actual technical stuff to talk about as opposed to just editorial things. All right, protocol document. Let's go. All right. So this one was one that Akira did the updates to this one, but I'm still going to present it as all the changes here. So thank you, Akira. Previously, if you have an error in different directions, we had a way for the TEEP agent to send errors to the TAM. Sorry, we had errors in one direction, but not the other direction. So here, the TEEP agent can send an error message to the TAM that says, by the way, your stuff was malformed, or I couldn't do it because I'm out of memory, or whatever it is. Okay, so we had a way to do that. There was nothing in the other direction. There was no way for a TAM to tell the agent, by the way, you're not forming your messages correctly, or I can't do it now, try again later, or something like that. There's no way to do that prior. And so we put that in there. An example of where you actually need this is if you have multiple TAMs, one for different components, like your TAM for your firmware and your TAM for your application, and the application depends on a later version of the firmware, and so that TAM doesn't have authority to update your firmware, right? And so you got to be able to send an error message to say, well, I can't get that because I have to go to my other TAM, and he says no, and so how do you even say that? And so now we added exactly the same way of encoding things, error code, error message. We put that into the query response, into the update message, just so now it's symmetric in both directions, that there's still a common error code space, but the way that you can use an IN assigned integer and an error message, you can do that in both directions. So next. So that one was, since those are both optional fields, right, that one isn't a breaking change, it's an addition that can be done. So I'll mention the one in a minute that's the breaking change. Okay, this is the one that Akira mentioned earlier that Asobe-san called out this threat that we needed to fix, which is where you have one agent that tries to use different agents' attestation results. Oh, he's healthy, therefore I'm going to use his attestation results, claim that I'm healthy and I'm good, right? Because those are valid attestation results. We had to make sure that there was a way that binds those attestation results to this TEEP agent at the TEEP protocol. So you had to have a binding between the attestation results and the TEEP message. And so this is actually what the CNF claim was designed for in the RFC 8747. And so when we cross-posted with the RATS list, this is the one that was the consensus on that email thread, and so we put that in there. So since this is now a mandatory claim, this one was a change that implementations have to make. Okay, and so that's what Akira was presenting at the hackathon, at the hackathon report. So this is those texts that was experimented with at the hackathon. So next. Okay, this is part of that same one. This is just what the security consideration text says, because it's secure and says, here's the attack and here's what the CNF is designed to prevent that attack. And this is what references that other RFC that defines it. So, okay. Next issue, Thomas Fossati correctly pointed out when he looked at the EAT profile defined in the TEEP spec. This is a EAT profile, but there's no claims that are mandatory. That seems really odd. And we said, yeah, you're right. Let's fix that. So now there's actually now there's mandatory claims. So the bottom under the new there's the required claims, and the additional claims means they're like conditional mandatory, right? So the nonce claim is mandatory if you negotiate the nonce freshness mechanism, right? The required claims are true regardless of the freshness mechanism, right? So that's the difference. It's mandatory and conditionally mandatory. But the labels that the EAT spec defines is required claims : and additional claims : that's just the template that the other spec created. So we tried to follow the template. Okay. Next. All right, so this one we discussed at last IETF, which is the relationship between the TEEP profile and the AR4SI. And we said we were going to think about it a little bit more and put text into the document based on the discussion. So I'm just going to report back out what we did. So to refresh your memory, figure 1 is the figure that appears in the architecture document, okay? And so you can see here, the attestation result comes back from the verifier back to the TAM. The TAM can then use that attestation result to decide, say, oh, it's out of policy, therefore I need to kick off an update message to do remediation because it's a failure attestation result. Okay. Separately, if it's a success result, then it comes down to the TEEP agent who can then use it in a passport model and present it to other relying parties, right? So in this example here, there's 2 different parties that are consuming the attestation result. The TAM is consuming it for purposes of, do I need to kick off an update? Okay. And the other relying party is using it to make, let's say a decision about authorization or whatever. Okay. So this one comes up to says, okay, so the which profile and that top line that comes down from the verifier to the TAM, which profile is it? Is it the TEEP profile, which is what the TAM needs, or is it AR4SI, which is what the other relying party might need? Okay, that's what the issue was. Okay, next slide. Okay. So the document now explains there are 3 cases, okay, for that question. The first case, actually go back for just a second here, because the 3 cases here have to do with a line that goes between the TAM and the verifier. Okay, the TEEP protocol is the bottom line, the line in between the TAM and the TEEP agent. That's the TEEP protocol. So the line up top is out of scope for this working group. Okay, but the 3 cases that TAM has to be able to deal with is whatever other protocol that you're using, we don't define that protocol. So he says out of whatever that protocol is, it's going to fit into 1 of 3 categories. And then here's what you do as far as the TAM goes. So let's go to the next one. So category 1 is where that upper protocol that's not TEEP actually has a way of asking the verifier to say, send me back attestation results in 2 different formats, right? Here's the evidence. Give me back both the TEEP profile and the AR4SI profile that I can deal with separately. Let's say you have a protocol that does that. Great. All that you do as a TAM is you say, here's the evidence, give me both profiles, and then I'll consume one and pass the other one on. Okay, that's case 1. Case 2, for you might have another protocol that says, okay, I can only give you 1, but the freshness mechanism is not nonce. Okay, and in that particular combination, that means you can take the same evidence, send it 1 query, says, here's some evidence, give me AR4SI. Thank you. Here's the same evidence again, by the way, and please give me TEEP profile this time. Okay, and this works because nonce is the only thing that would vary between those 2, so you can reuse the same one. The other freshness mechanisms of timestamp and epoch ID, you can use them within a particular time period, and so it's perfectly fine, right? So this one says, if you're a TAM, you have this other type of protocol, here's what you can do, no change to the TEEP protocol. Case 3 is where you have where you kind of luck out or get unlucky, and says you can only ask for 1 evidence per profile, one format per evidence, but you got to have a nonce. So that means you can't actually send it the same evidence. You got to have 2 different evidences. And so here it says it's actually much better to not use that picture. Okay, and just say the TEEP agent, you just go around it. If you want the AR4SI, you just go talk to the verifier directly and don't use this optimization. So these 3 cases, what the document has right now that's intended to resolve that issue. We think this is consistent with what we talked about at IETF115, but this is what we came up with and put into the document, and so we're presenting it out in case we got it wrong. Okay. Now I'm done talking about things that are specific to EAT only, and now I'm going to talk about suit, okay, where suit actually relates to EAT here. So the first one was the use of suit inside the EAT manifests claim, right? So in your attestation report, then you have a manifest claim. You can say what suit components are installed there, but how do you name them and so on. So we finally put into there, the following is in the EAT profile section. The software name claim for a trusted component holds the URI of the suit manifest for that component. This was just not specified before, so now it's specified. Hopefully this works for implementations. As far as we know, it does. Second one is the manifest claim uses a suit manifest, where the manifest body contains a suit reference. Okay, and then it points to suit report for the details. Okay, so now it says here's what you fill into those claims, where previously we just didn't say. Okay. All right. This one was editorial. We had some message exchange, and Hannah said, gee, this was a very useful thread. Let's put it in the document. And so we did. So it summarizes out of mandatory implement algorithms and crypto suites and so on. It says there's actually 5 different things going on here in the TEEP agent and so on. Right. There's how you sign TEEP messages themselves. Okay. And by the way, we only sign those. We don't encrypt in the current protocol. Then there's how do you sign evidence? Okay, and then that goes off to the verifier, right? Not the TAM, but the verifier. There's how do you encrypt evidence? How do you sign and optionally encrypt suit reports? Because that might go to some other entity, logs or whatever. And then finally, how do you sign or encrypt suit manifest being sent down to the device, right? Those are like 5 different types of things that are all signed or encrypted, okay? And so that means you got to agree on what the cipher suite is for each of those 5 cases and have a way to either negotiate that or at least hard code it or say what's mandatory. Okay. And so we already had documentation in there about some of those cases, but not all of them. And so the rest of this is about, okay, that was the overview part that kind of sets the context for what we can be talking about. And then we have to have a way to say, how do you negotiate the other things that weren't previously specified? So, yeah, next slide, please. Okay, so the security question is there can be sensitive information that's inside EATs, and there can be sensitive information inside suit reports, and therefore we need to allow those to be encrypted. It's not required if you have a case where it's sending, public sensor data from a public device or something like that. You can choose to not encrypt it, right? But we have to have a way that's defined to do it for the cases, which we expect is probably most of them where there's sensitive information. And so we said, well, you could encrypt the TEEP messages themselves, but we kind of already decided to not do that, to kind of push it down a level and do like cozy level and not message level, the object inside the TEEP message. And so we had to decide what encryption algorithms are mandatory to implement. We only talked about signing algorithms that were mandatory. Last IETF 115, we had a discussion. And so Brendan and Russ and Hannes had all weighed in there, and you look at the minutes, and it suggests we should probably use an AEAD algorithm with, for example, CCM. The suit mandatory algorithm had AEAD with GCM, not CCM. So we said, well, we either go with a suggestion in the last one, or we go to match what's in the suit MTI, and we decided let's match what's in the suit MTI, which is our normative reference. So that was the one goal, but we had to have a way to negotiate them, right, for crypto agility. So next slide. Okay, so here's what we put into there. Whether we got it right, I'll let you judge here. So besides being able to negotiate the TEEP cipher suite for the signature algorithm of TEEP messages, we put in a way to negotiate EAT-suit cipher suites, okay, which is in parallel to the supported TEEP cipher suite. Okay, looks very similar, but the fact that we put the EAT cipher suite and the suit cipher suite, was out of those 5 bullets that were up there, one of them is suit, one of them is EAT, and we said if you're going to encrypt them, then we put those into the same negotiation, which means you can't negotiate a different thing for suit as you negotiate for EAT. Okay. If there's a use case that we need those to be different, we can split this. We didn't do that. We said it's better if you can minimize the number of algorithms you have in the device and the complexity of the negotiation. So this seemed to be a simpler thing if we don't need the ability for them to be different. Okay. So right now our proposal is whatever you're using for suit encryption and whatever you're using for EAT encryption, like how do you encrypt suit reports and how do you encrypt EAT tokens that come out of the device, use the same algorithm. Okay, allows us to scale down to a constrained device much more easily. Okay, and so that's our proposal. If we hear no objections, then we'll keep going forward with that. But this is the one question we wanted to make sure we didn't get something wrong. Okay, next. Okay, this is the only. I don't know if this is the last slide, but this is the only one where I know that the current draft needs a change. Okay, otherwise there's 0 open issues. That there are technical open issues, right? But this one does need a change, and that's because the suit MTI document that we reference, we published the TEEP protocol document sort of midday on the internet draft deadline. At the last minute, suit MTI got posted at the last minute, and it changed so that we don't match anymore. And so what it did is it replaced HPKE with ECDH. Okay, and HPKE is still a working group item where ECDH is a standard already. And so it flipped to not take a dependency on a not published document yet. And so in here, the TEEP protocol says HPKE in there because it was referencing the previous, draft Moran suit MTI. Okay, so the proposal is, let's again match suit MTI, make the same change that was made there, and just change HPKE to ECDH, and then it will match suit MTI, and everybody will be happy, I hope. So that's the one change that we know we need to make, and it's because of a race condition in draft submission. Okay, so that one is the only known issue that we have to fix, and it's an obvious fix, right? Change HPKE to ECDH and change the text that's quoted up there that mentions HPKE and references the COSA HPKE draft, right? And see in the first paragraph, that's a reference to a draft that will become reference to an RFC, which is the ECDH one. Okay, so that's the only change that we know that needs to be done to the current draft. Is that it? Or should I have one more? That's it. Okay, so the hope is, unless there's any other issues that get raised, is that we make the change that I just talked about to make it match suit MTI, to change HPKE to ECDH, and then we believe it's ready for working group last call. Because there's no issues anybody's raised, so.
Any questions, any comments on the draft?
And we have multiple, I think, interoperable implementations now of the draft. So I think this is the first hackathon where, this is the second hackathon where we've come out of the hackathon with 0 open issues. But it's the first hackathon that there have been no additional issues open between the hackathon and the TEEP working group meeting. So this is the first working group meeting where we can say there are 0 open issues. Other than that's partly because that last one that I showed doesn't have an issue filed on it. It's just something that's on the slide. So we know we got to do that one. So there could be an issue now, and that's the only one. So, all right, thanks.
Yeah, I think all the issues have been addressed there. So only one issue that we were discussing was the normative dependency you have on the several drafts in drafts and suit working group, like the one that you just fixed up, right? With these dependencies and these drafts still evolving, right? How do you see that? If you progress further ahead, then would you see that there would be challenges in the future? We will definitely do the working group last call, but
Yeah, obviously we can't have an RFC with a normative dependency joining that draft, right? And so this would get held up until the last normative dependency. And at least removing the COSA HPKE reference means it's no longer blocked on that one, right?
Yeah.
But it is blocked on things like making sure that EAT goes to RFC. But since I think the EAT one is closer in the process than this is, I'm hoping that.
It's just starting the process, yeah.
Okay.
So the only question that we were discussing, and you just raised one of the concerns we had, is since you have dependencies, what if they change, right? And so we're definitely going to do the working group last call.
Yeah,
It's a question of at which point do we shepherd it forward, given the level of maturity on the
That's right.
normative.
Yeah.
work
So
that you've
my
done.
understanding is EAT has already had a working group last call, and that's what I meant by it may not be in the ISG yet, but it's already had a working group last
Oh,
call started.
It's already
Yeah.
request for publication.
Right. So as I'm saying, this one is
But-
at the tail end of any of the normal, all the normative references this one makes are farther along in the process. I mean, they've already had a working group last call.
Even the HPK one? And
No,
all
we're
that?
removing that reference is the point. Once we have this, that one goes away.
Oh, I misunderstood. Okay.
The only known change is to remove any mention of HPKE from this document. And then it will reference ECDH, which is an already RFC.
Okay.
And at that point, my belief is all normative reference are farther along in the IETF process. I mean, they've already had at least a working group last call, if not farther.
Including the suit one. Okay.
come to the SUIT meeting because there, I think the discussion will be starting the working group last call of SUIT MTI. I don't think that's happened yet, but I think that is something that the chairs would like to do in the SUIT meeting. I don't know if Russ is in the room, but I'm one of the chairs. And we talked about trying to start that. So that one, my hope is that SUIT may start working group last call
Well, as long as they
before
leave-
this one's working group last call
Right.
starts.
Okay.
That's good. Do we have anything else?
Yeah, so Hannes, you're remote? You were up next? Because I don't see Russ in the room.
Yeah, I haven't seen any slides from them. I'm not.
We have to push, yes. Let me see.
But does the firmware encryption update has any impact on the TEEP protocol draft, Dave? I see we have an agenda to discuss the firmware update encryption. Okay.
So Hannes cannot talk. Give us 1 second, we're chatting.
It's a normative reference.
Yeah, I'm looking right now. So this is a good question. All right, here's the list of normative references that are internet drafts right now. COSA HPKE, that's one that we said we'll remove. Okay.
Yep.
RATS EAT, okay, that one we
That's
talked about.
already ahead.
Reference interaction models is in RATS.
Yeah, and that one hasn't had the,
Okay. So anything that's in this category, that's why it's useful to run through this list right now, because there are other
Okay.
things we could like convert to informative references by changing wording somehow. SUIT firmware encryption, that's one I was just commenting on. SUIT manifest, that one's,
that one had gone through, I
yeah.
thought. Yeah.
SUIT report, that one's in the same category as SUIT MTI, and same thing with SUIT trust domains, right? And so one of the questions we're going to have on, is it Thursday that SUIT? Wednesday or Thursday, whichever one, is can we start working group last call now on those three? Or is there anything that needs to happen before we start working group last call? So they're all kind of simultaneous with this. So.
Okay.
That would be good.
By the way, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry for my bad internet connectivity. Yeah. So the firmware encryption, and this is a presentation at the SUIT meeting itself, but the major change we made was, as Dave already mentioned, was to swap HPKE-based content key distribution with the semi-static Diffie-Hellman that is already in the COSI specification. That's quite a change in some sense, but as you have seen, there was very slow progress on HPKE, and so we couldn't. I think it was the right decision to move back and go for a less efficient but more conservative approach. But still, the functionality is needed. I think there's a normative dependency on the firmware encryption as well as on the SUIT manifest, and I think also on another document with trust domains that we really need to push the SUIT group to go forward to a working group last call as soon as possible. So, yeah, I think I don't know whether there would be a possibility to actually resolve that normative dependency in some other way, but maybe there is. Does that make sense?
So Dave, there, I was just looking at the actual wording that uses the references the firmware encryption in the TEEP protocol document. My belief is it would be straightforward to change that to be informative. I think all but one of the sentences are already clearly informative, And so it's actually easy, meaning if it matters, right? We could leave it as is. If firmware encryption is going to go just as fast with this, then that's fine too. But if we needed to move it to be informative, I don't see a problem with doing that. Unlike the other ones that would need to stay normative, right? The suit manifest, suit reports, and suit MTI, all those really have to be normative. The firmware encryption could be done informative if we needed to. That's my reading in the protocol.
Yeah, I would actually prefer that because I believe there's also this other dependency with the trust domains draft as well, which also needs to go into working group as last call as well, depending on how you use the firmware encryption, or in this case, the software encryption. But I think that's a case we need to analyze a little bit further. But irrespectively of that, I think it would make sense to make sure that those documents advance a little bit faster in the suit working group, to make use of the functionality, because clearly the functionality is important. Like, we want to encrypt personalization data, or at least we want to have the possibility to do so.
So Dave, will you address those in the next version of the draft?
If you mean by address those means
Moving some of those to informative.
the only one that I think is easy to change to informative is firmware encryption. And so based on the suit meeting, I'll know whether there's actually a reason to do that. But assuming there is, then yes, I can do that at the same time as we change the HPKE to ECDH. The other ones, I don't think that's possible. And so I think we really need to make sure that suit goes through working group last call. And yeah, Hannes is right. Trust domains is another one in that category. I did not check the language on that one to see if that one is possible to move to informative. I can check that. But at least MTI, suit reports, and suit manifest, all three of those have to be normative. And that's because there's actually TEEP protocol message fields for those, right? Things that are just done by the suit processor, you can make those be informative because the TEEP agent code itself doesn't change. It's the suit processor code that does. And that's why you can move them to be informative if you phrase it right. So.
Okay.
And all the RATs drafts have to be normative, right?
The only RATs draft is there's two RATs drafts. There's the reference interaction models. I don't remember why that one's referenced without checking the text. If that's for the, it might be for the nonce part.
I don't remember.
I have to check. But certainly EAT has to be normative, as well as the, I don't know if we even reference the media types, but if we do, that one could probably go either way. That's just a justification.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I don't think you do.
Yeah, I don't think so.
And I'm trying to remember if you do something with the R4C.
AR4SI is already informative. And that's because TEEP doesn't care about that. It just says if you needed some other protocol, some other profile like AR4SI, here's some considerations. But TEEP doesn't actually care about it. The protocol
It has to be normative.
Oh,
The
yeah,
reference.
looking at the considerations.
Yeah.
For the reference interaction, the way you have it written right now, it has to be normative.
It's used in the freshness mechanism, so.
Yeah. Right, it's in the nonce.
It's
Freshness.
only, yeah, it's the definition of the nonce freshness mechanism, right?
Right.
And so the only way we could make that one not be normative would be to rip out the nonce stuff and say a mechanism such as and leave it for other things. And so I'd rather not do that. If we can, I mean, my personal opinion is I'd rather hold it to get the reference interaction models, but because it would be some work, it'd be doable, but I just wouldn't like it. So because now, the problem is just like for Cypher suites, you got to have something that's mandatory to implement. And right now, the only thing that's mandatory to implement for freshness is the nonce one, and it depends on reference interaction models for nonce. And something where you can make it be normative is to either make something else be mandatory to implement or have nothing that's mandatory to implement. And that's why I don't like it, because I don't like either of those options.
After you publish the revised draft, we'll initiate the working group last call. I think for 4 weeks, I think let's go for a 4-week working group last call.
So Dave, just ping us when you're ready with the new draft and we'll issue the working group last call.
Good. Anything else?
So Hannes, we had you down to talk about the firmware encryption, but maybe we don't need to? Is that about right?
Yeah, I think so. Because I will talk at the suit meeting about sort of the details on the changes regarding the semi-static Diffie-Hellman approach, and what's in the document. But I think, at least conceptually, from a deep point of view, nothing changed. This is sort of like really a detail on how the content encryption key gets established and is then applied to the protection of the payload, to the trusted component, to the personalization data. So in that sense, I think from a deep point of view, everything is fine. So I think that's, at least that's a positive aspect.
Thanks, Hannes.
One question, it was related to the use of the CNF, which the thread that Akira pointed out, and I believe that was verified at the hackathon. I missed that part on how, whether that was verified implementation wise, or and how it was done. Could Akira or Dave say a few words about it?
Yeah. Akira, you want to take that? No.
Oh, that's okay. You can just state your name since, go up to the queue since it's a question.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. This is Kohei. I'm implementing TAM server. And in this hackathon, my coworker, Shinichi, and I try to implement CNF. So the Dave suggestions, so CNF claims should contain the hash of public keys. So how to calculate, how to denote the public key hashes into the CNF claim. So we try to find the specification. So for example, the order of the each cryptographic key factors. So for example, XY or YX in ECDS keys. So I've found the JWK specifications. So especially so JWK some prints. So but so in Shiba or in Koze, so we couldn't find the specification. So we arranged to the our specification for implementing purposes. So, but so maybe so there are no interoperabilities for how to calculate or how to describe the key informations. So if you have or any specifications or any suggestions for the implementing or some guides, okay, that's all.
Thanks a lot. I would definitely like to look at the code that you put together, and give you some recommendations on how this was supposed to be done. I was co-authoring the document, and so I should have an idea on how this works. But thanks for looking into this. Really great.
Go ahead, Akira.
This is Akira. Extension to what Sobe-san offered now is at the hackathon on Saturday and Sunday. We started to implement CNF on Saturday, not before, and we finished it with the TAM server having a CNF agent and SGs having a CNN and T broker T agent and on fee having a CNN. So and those are going to be, is it already on GitHub or yeah. Yeah, so yes, so as you could see the code, how to handle the CNN. And we will let you know the link.
You can repost the link to the mail list, Akita. That would be good. Thank you.
I think we're all done. We're good.
Any other business? We can do open mic. Anyone? I can do a count. Oh, Dave's getting up. Oh,
That's all right.
no, that's
That's all right.
okay. That's okay. You can be moved, honest.
Yeah.
Anybody else wondering, the 8747 section, one you referenced for CNET, has a couple different ways of doing possession, and the one that TEEP is using is the one that's in section 3.4, representation of the PID for possession key. And the point is that TEEP is not doing this in a specific way. This is a generic claim, right?
Yep.
It's part of a closing thing. That section does say the content of the PID value is application specific. For example, some applications may choose to use graphic hash and public key values to get the PID value. So the only thing you have to do to use an application is to say, what's the content of the PID value? And so right now, what our document, so that's something that is not specified in the reference, right? We have to actually do that. We have to say, what is the KID value when using this? And so that, and it says, you may choose to use a cryptographic hash, the public key value. So we did. We said, okay, you're going to use SHA-256, although technically we say it's whatever the crypto algorithm that's negotiated in the cipher suite is. It's just that the only ones that are mandatory implement use SHA-256, right? So you take your public key and you use SHA-256 over it. And so if that's not specific enough, we can say more, right? If you have to say, well, here's how you do the SHA-256 of your public key. But if you have a public key in a binary format, if it's clear what that binary format is, then you run the SHA-256 over it and that gives you the result. If we need to specify more that says, and here's what format you have to convert it into before you run the hash or something like that, we could do that if there's any ambiguity there. So that's part of the question maybe is implementers, did everybody do it the same way from the current text, or do we need to specify it in more detail?
Thanks, Dave. Okay, okay, go ahead, Akita.
This is different topic, but something related to my hackathon report. The last changes we made yesterday in the make file is we do not have to update the CDDF file when we edit the MD file. However, we need both MD file and CD file in the GitHub repository. Otherwise, whoever going to have a dependency in the future and TEEP protocol CDDF file, they need to curl wget to download the CDDF to do the CDDF syntax checks. So if we update from now on the MD file, you do not need to edit the CDDF file, but you need to push and commit and push to the GitHub or Git repository, both MD and CDDF file.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think you should inform other working groups which are working using CDDL formats.
You might want to put that as a comment in the. Yeah, well, put it like in the make file right there, if you're going to do this, that would help. Okay, any other business?
Yeah, going once, twice, thrice. I think we're all good.
All right.
See you in the next session.
Thank you, everyone. Good work. We're getting
Yeah.
close.
Yes.
Getting close.
I would love to be done.
Well, I did ask Hank, so he will likely ask you to review the reference interaction models. And if you give it the go, he can request on the mail list, and we can start the working group last call on that one too. All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you for those who were remote. And then, oh, hey, were you doing it on the headstock, the notes? Thank you. Okay, so you can either mail it to us or you can update in the headstock. Just make sure you